In Sycamore Bend, the cul-de-sac looked like the picture of safety. Lawns trimmed, kids riding bikes, neighbors waving from porches. That illusion shattered when a white van stopped for Nia Cole. At 11, she was still young enough to be vulnerable, her small frame pulled toward the dark interior as neighbors froze in shock. Her father, Isaiah, seemed like just another suburban dad enjoying the quiet life. What the kidnappers didn't realize was that Isaiah Cole wasn't ordinary. He was a Navy SEAL. Years of combat had prepared him for this moment. They thought they were in control. They couldn't be more wrong. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Sycamore Bend as Isaiah Cole's SUV turned into their peaceful cul-de-sac. The familiar sound of lawn mowers hummed in the distance, and rainbow mists from spinning sprinklers caught the golden light. Kids on bikes wove lazy patterns on the street while parents tended to their yards. "Dad, wait. Before we unload everything, I need to show you something," Nia said, her voice carrying an unusual edge of seriousness. The 11-year-old held up her phone, her dark eyes intent behind her purple-framed glasses. Isaiah turned off the engine and shifted in his seat to face his daughter. Even after a routine grocery run, his training kept him scanning their surroundings, an unconscious habit from his SEAL days that had never quite faded. "What's up, baby girl?" "I recorded this 2 days ago behind the clubhouse," Nia explained, holding up her phone. "I was walking home from the pool and heard shouting." The video showed Sergeant Clay Burris, a cop Isaiah recognized from neighborhood meetings, aggressively shoving a black teenager against the clubhouse wall. The boy couldn't have been more than 15, wearing basketball shorts and a Warriors jersey. Burris's face was red with anger as he grabbed the front of the kid's shirt. "What are you doing back here?" Burris's voice crackled through the phone's speaker. "This is private property, you little punk." The officer gave another hard shove, making the teenager's head snap back against the brick wall. "I'm just cutting through to get home, sir," the boy stammered, hands raised. "My mom lives on Lake—" "Shut up," Burris snarled, pressing his forearm across the teen's chest. "I'm sick of you people thinking you can go wherever you want. Next time I catch you here, you're going in cuffs." Isaiah's jaw tightened as he watched. The video was short, but damning. Clear abuse of power caught in broad daylight. He noticed Nia's hands trembling slightly as she held the phone. "I was hiding behind the AC unit," she whispered. "He didn't see me filming." Isaiah gently took the phone, rewatching the clip. His military training kicked in, analyzing details, the timestamp, the angle, the clear view of Burris's badge number. "You did the right thing showing me this, Nia, but we need to be careful about sharing it until we figure out the best way to handle it." "I already posted it to," Nia started to say. "Let's get these groceries inside first," Isaiah interrupted softly, not wanting to have this conversation in the car. "Then we'll talk about what to do next." They climbed out into the warm afternoon. Isaiah popped the trunk, grabbing several bags while Nia slung her backpack over her shoulder. The weight of what they'd just watched hung between them as Isaiah sorted through the groceries. A white van with tinted windows crawled past their driveway, moving unusually slow for their quiet street. Isaiah's combat instincts tingled. Something about the vehicle's deliberate pace felt wrong. He was reaching for another bag when the van suddenly jerked to a stop. The side door slid open with a bang. 2 men in black clothes and ski masks exploded out of the vehicle with practiced coordination. Before Isaiah could shout a warning, one of them had Nia in his grip, thick arms wrapped around her chest, lifting her off her feet. "Daddy!" Nia's scream pierced the peaceful afternoon as the man dragged her toward the waiting van. Her phone clattered to the pavement. The second masked man moved to block Isaiah's path, dropping into an aggressive stance. Through the eye holes of his mask, cold blue eyes studied Isaiah with predatory focus. Isaiah let the grocery bag fall from his hands. Cans of soup and vegetables rolled across the driveway in slow motion. Time seemed to crystallize as his SEAL training took over, combat awareness expanding to take in every detail. The first kidnapper was struggling with Nia's thrashing body, trying to maneuver her into the van's dark interior. Isaiah caught a glimpse of a sheriff's star tattooed on the man's neck as his mask shifted. The second attacker was bigger, moving with the practiced stance of someone used to violence. Neighbors' faces appeared in windows. A kid on a bike froze mid-pedal. Someone shouted in the distance, but Isaiah's world had narrowed to geometric simplicity. The distance to his daughter, the angles of attack, the mechanical advantage points he could use against the kidnappers. His first move would have to disable the blocking attacker while simultaneously preventing the van from escaping with Nia. In the split second before he launched himself forward, Isaiah's mind catalogued his advantages. The van's door track, the curb height, the loose gravel on the pavement that could compromise an opponent's footing. The late afternoon sun caught the silver trim of the van's side mirror as Isaiah's muscles coiled to spring. The peaceful suburban scene was about to explode into violence. But unlike his attackers, Isaiah wouldn't be fighting with mere brutality. He would be fighting with the precise, devastating efficiency that had kept him alive through countless missions. The difference between a thug and a warrior was training. And these men, whoever they were, had just made the fatal mistake of threatening a Navy SEAL's daughter. Nia screamed again as Isaiah surged forward, his feet leaving the ground as the careful choreography of combat began to unfold. The peaceful afternoon shattered like glass as the first devastating impact loomed. Isaiah exploded into motion, launching himself at the kidnapper holding Nia. His body moved with lethal precision, each action flowing from thousands of hours of training. The van's sliding door was still open, a critical vulnerability he could exploit. He slammed his shoulder into the door, driving it hard against the raised curb. Metal screeched as the door jammed in its track, preventing it from closing. The kidnapper holding Nia stumbled, thrown off balance by the impact. "Let her go," Isaiah growled, his voice carrying the quiet menace of someone who knew exactly how much damage they could inflict. The bigger attacker swung a meaty fist at Isaiah's head. Isaiah slipped the punch, feeling the wind of it pass his ear. In the same fluid motion, he grabbed a loose seat belt dangling from the van's interior. The nylon strap became a weapon in his hands. He snapped the belt like a whip, catching the larger man across the face. The masked attacker reeled back, cursing. Isaiah didn't hesitate. He drove his elbow up and under the man's ribs, feeling something crack. The kidnapper doubled over, gasping. Nia thrashed in the first attacker's grip, her legs kicking wildly. One of her feet connected solidly with the man's knee. He grunted in pain, his hold loosening just enough. Isaiah seized the moment. He grabbed the man's mask and ripped it off, exposing a pale face twisted with rage. A black tattoo of a sheriff's star stood out starkly against the skin of his neck. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, long enough for Isaiah to memorize every detail of the man's features. "You picked the wrong kid," Isaiah said, his words precise and cold. The fight spilled onto the manicured lawn as Isaiah pressed his advantage. Scattered groceries crunched under their feet, crushed cereal boxes, rolling cans, and spilled milk soaking into the grass. A nearby sprinkler system clicked on, sending jets of water arcing across the scene. The bigger attacker recovered and charged, trying to tackle Isaiah from behind. But Isaiah was already moving. He redirected the man's momentum, using a hip throw that sent him crashing into his partner. Both kidnappers went down hard. Nia broke free in the chaos, scrambling away. "Dad!" she screamed. "Run to the house," Isaiah ordered, keeping himself between her and the attackers. The man with the star tattoo pulled something from his waistband, the metallic glint of a knife catching the sunlight. Isaiah's combat training kicked into an even higher gear. This wasn't just a fight anymore, it was a lethal threat against his child. He closed the distance before the knife could come up, trapping the armed hand and applying crushing pressure to the wrist. Bones ground together. The knife dropped harmlessly to the wet grass. Around them, neighbors had emerged from their homes. Cell phones recorded the scene from porches and driveways. Someone was shouting about calling the police. The larger kidnapper staggered to his feet, blood running from where the seatbelt had split his mask. He looked from Isaiah to his fallen partner, then back to the jammed van door. Making his decision, he lurched toward the vehicle's cab. The engine roared to life. Tires squealed on pavement as the van began to pull away. The man with the star tattoo broke free of Isaiah's grip and made a desperate dive for the open side door. He barely managed to hang on as the van accelerated, his legs dragging on the street. Isaiah let them go. Getting the license plate was less important than checking on his daughter. He could hear sirens approaching in the distance as he turned toward Nia. She stood trembling on their front lawn, her glasses askew, clothes rumpled from the struggle. The moment their eyes met, she ran to him. Isaiah dropped to his knees in the wet grass, catching her in his arms. "I've got you, baby girl," he whispered, holding her tight against his chest. He could feel her whole body shaking. "I've got you. You're safe." Water from the sprinkler system continued to rain down around them, mixing with the tears on Nia's cheeks. Isaiah's muscles ached from the fight, and he could feel bruises forming where he'd taken hits. But none of that mattered. His daughter was safe in his arms. Neighbors gathered closer, their phones still recording. Ms. Lorraine from next door was already walking over with a blanket. The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights beginning to flash at the entrance to their cul-de-sac. "Did you see their faces?" Nia asked through her tears. "I saw one of them," Isaiah said, smoothing her wet hair back from her face. "And they're going to regret ever coming near you." He held her tighter as the first police car pulled up. Isaiah's military training was already cataloging every detail he'd observed: heights, builds, fighting styles, the star tattoo, the van's make and model. He would find these men. But right now, his only mission was being there for his daughter. The peaceful Sunday afternoon had shattered into violence, leaving scattered groceries and shocked neighbors in its wake. But as Isaiah knelt on his front lawn, Nia trembling in his embrace, he knew with absolute certainty that he would do whatever it took to keep her safe. The kidnappers had made a terrible mistake targeting his family. They just didn't know it yet. Detective Lena Ortiz pulled up as the last traces of sunlight faded from the sky. Red and blue lights from the patrol cars strobed against the neat row of suburban homes, turning the peaceful cul-de-sac into an emergency scene. She stepped out of her unmarked car, taking in the scattered groceries still littering the Coles' front lawn, and the small crowd of neighbors gathered behind the yellow police tape. Isaiah sat on his front porch steps, with Nia curled against his side, a blanket from Ms. Lorraine wrapped around her shoulders. He'd cleaned up and changed his shirt, but Ortiz could see the beginning of bruises forming along his jaw and forearms. "Mr. Cole?" she approached, badge already in hand. "I'm Detective Lena Ortiz. Mind if we talk about what happened here?" Isaiah nodded, giving Nia's shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Can we do this inside? My daughter's had enough of being a spectacle today." "Of course." Ortiz followed them into the house, noting the military photos on the wall and the pristine organization of the living room. Combat discipline carried over into civilian life. They settled at the kitchen table, Nia still pressed close to her father's side. Ortiz pulled out her notebook, her pen hovering over the blank page. "Walk me through it," she said. Isaiah's account was precise, tactical, exactly what she'd expect from a former SEAL. He described the van's approach, the attackers' positions, every move of the fight in clear detail. When he mentioned the sheriff's star tattoo, Ortiz's pen paused briefly on the paper. Isaiah caught the slight hesitation. "That detail means something to you," he said. It wasn't a question. Ortiz chose her next words carefully. "Several recent reports have mentioned similar tattoos. Nothing conclusive yet." She met his eyes. "You should tread carefully, Mr. Cole. Some waters run deeper than they appear." Before Isaiah could respond, a knock at the door made Nia jump. Ms. Lorraine stood on the porch, holding up her phone. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I thought you should see this." "My security camera caught most of it." The footage was sharp and clear. Isaiah's explosive response to the attack, the brutal efficiency of his moves, the moment he ripped off the kidnapper's mask. Ortiz watched it twice, taking notes. "Several neighbors got footage," Ms. Lorraine added. "That young couple across the street, the Kims, their doorbell camera caught the van's approach. And Mrs. Davidson next door was filming on her phone the whole time." "We'll need copies of everything," Ortiz said. She turned back to Isaiah. "Any idea why they targeted your daughter specifically?" Isaiah started to shake his head, but Nia spoke up in a small voice. I think it was because of my phone." "Baby, what do you mean?" Isaiah asked. Nia pulled her phone from her pocket, fingers trembling slightly as she pulled up a video. "Remember that thing I showed you earlier? With Sergeant Burris?" The video was shaky, but clear enough. A uniformed officer shoving a black teenager against a wall behind the HOA clubhouse, aggressive and cursing. Ortiz's expression hardened as she recognized Burris. "When did you record this?" she asked Nia gently. 2 days ago. I was walking home from the pool and heard yelling." Nia pressed closer to Isaiah. "The boy wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just sitting there." Ortiz watched the video again, her jaw tight. "Mr. Cole, I'm going to be straight with you. This complicates things. Because it shows one of your officers abusing his power?" Isaiah's voice was calm but carried an edge. "Because Burris has friends in high places." Ortiz met his gaze directly. "And a history of complaints disappearing. You understand what I'm saying?" Isaiah nodded slowly. "Crystal clear, Detective." They spent another hour going over details, Ortiz taking statements from neighbors who filtered in and out. Through it all, she noticed how Isaiah kept Nia close, how his eyes tracked every movement, how he positioned himself between his daughter and the windows. Finally, well after dark, Ortiz packed up her notebook. "I'll need you both to come down to the station tomorrow to sign formal statements. For tonight, lock up tight." She paused at the door. "And Mr. Cole? Watch your back. Not everyone who carries a badge deserves to." After she left, Isaiah did a thorough security check of the house while Ms. Lorraine sat with Nia. He tested every window, every lock, checked the garage door mechanism and the back gate. Only when he was satisfied did he start Nia's bedtime routine. "Extra story tonight?" he asked as she climbed into bed, her favorite stuffed penguin clutched tight. "Can you just stay until I fall asleep?" "Of course, baby girl." He sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "I promise you're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you. But what if they come back? Then they'll have to get through me." He kissed her forehead. "And that's not going to happen. Remember what I always tell you?" "You've got my back," Nia whispered. "Always and forever." Isaiah stayed until her breathing evened out into sleep, her grip on the penguin finally relaxing. He was doing one final check of the house when movement caught his eye through the front window. A white van, different from the one from earlier but similar enough to set off warning bells, cruised slowly past the entrance to the cul-de-sac. Its headlights were off, making it nearly invisible in the darkness. Isaiah watched from behind the curtain, his body tensed for action. The van completed its circuit and disappeared around the corner. But the message was clear. This wasn't over. The morning sun cast long shadows across Isaiah's front lawn as he sipped his coffee, watching Nia get ready for school. The events of yesterday felt almost dreamlike, but the bruises on his arms and the tight knot in his stomach were very real. A sharp knock at the door made them both freeze. Isaiah moved to the window first, his military training kicking in. Two uniformed officers stood on his porch, and behind them, looking maddeningly pleased with himself, was Gabe "Red" Mallory, the self-appointed head of neighborhood security. "Stay in the kitchen," Isaiah told Nia quietly. She nodded, clutching her backpack to her chest. Isaiah opened the door, keeping his body positioned to block entry. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Cole." Mallory stepped forward, his contractor's tan making his teeth look artificially white when he smiled. "We need to discuss yesterday's incident." "Nothing to discuss. Two men tried to kidnap my daughter. End of story." One of the officers, a stocky man with a crew cut, cleared his throat. "Sir, we have witness statements indicating you assaulted two neighborhood watch volunteers who were responding to reports of juvenile theft." Isaiah's grip tightened on the doorframe. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Mallory pulled out a tablet, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Because we have multiple reports of a young person matching your daughter's description filming around the HOA clubhouse without authorization. When our volunteers attempted to question her about suspicious activity, they tried to drag her into a van." Isaiah cut in, his voice deadly calm. "They were attempting to detain a suspect," the second officer said, "as is their right under the Neighborhood Watch Charter." Isaiah heard Nia's small gasp from the kitchen, his jaw clenched. "Show me this charter that allows grown men to grab children off the street." "Mr. Cole," Mallory's voice hardened slightly, "we take community safety very seriously here. Now, if you'll step outside, we need to conduct a search of your vehicle." "Not without a warrant." The first officer produced a paper. "Got one right here. Signed by Judge Halbrook this morning." Isaiah recognized the name. The judge lived 3 streets over in one of the biggest houses in the subdivision. He'd seen him at HOA meetings, always sitting close to Mallory. With no choice, Isaiah stepped onto his driveway. More neighbors were gathering now, drawn by the police presence. He saw phones being raised to record. "Under the SUV," one officer called out. He reached beneath Isaiah's vehicle and emerged holding a hunting knife in an evidence bag. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Isaiah's laugh was bitter. "Really? That's what you're going with?" "Possession of an illegal weapon," the officer read out, pulling his handcuffs free. "Turn around, sir." "That knife wasn't there last night," Isaiah said clearly, making sure the recording neighbors could hear. "Detective Ortiz did a full sweep of the property." "Turn around," the officer repeated, "or we add resisting arrest." Isaiah complied, his military training warring with his instincts as the cuffs clicked shut. He heard Nia's scream before he saw her burst out of the house. "Daddy, no!" She tried to run to him, but was intercepted by 2 women in business casual wear who seemed to materialize from nowhere. "It's okay, sweetheart," one said in a practiced, soothing voice. "I'm Mrs. Peters from Child Protective Services. We're here to make sure you're safe." "I am safe," Nia struggled. "With my dad. He protected me." Now, Mallory stepped in, his voice thick with false sympathy. "Your father's demonstrated some concerning behavior. Judge Halbrook has authorized temporary protective supervision until we can sort this all out." Isaiah pulled against the cuffs, his voice tight with controlled fury. "You touch my daughter and what, Mr. Cole?" Mallory raised an eyebrow. "More threats of violence?" You're not really helping your case here. The CPS workers were trying to lead a fighting Nia toward their car when a commanding voice cut through the chaos. Take your hands off that child right now. Ms. Lorraine Whitaker stood at the end of the driveway, her silver hair gleaming in the morning sun. Though retired for years, she still carried the unmistakable authority of a principal who'd managed troubled schools for 3 decades. Ms. Lorraine, Mallory started, this is official. Official what? She walked forward, her cane tapping sharply against the concrete. Official harassment? Official corruption? Official racism? She fixed the CPS workers with a stern glare. I know every child services regulation in this state, and I don't see any emergency circumstances that would justify removal without a hearing. The workers hesitated, looking uncertainly at the officers. Furthermore, Ms. Lorraine continued, as a mandated reporter for 40 years, I've already submitted my witness statement about yesterday's attempted kidnapping to both Detective Ortiz and the FBI's Civil Rights Division. She reached for Nia's hand. So, unless you want to explain to a federal judge why you're separating a child from her father based on obviously planted evidence, I suggest you reconsider. Mallory's smile had vanished. Ms. Whitaker, you're interfering with... With what? Her voice could have frozen fire. Your little power play? Your attempt to silence a child who recorded something she shouldn't have seen? She pulled Nia close. The only thing I'm interfering with is injustice. And believe me, I've had plenty of practice. The CPS workers exchanged glances, then stepped back. Even the officers looked uncomfortable. This isn't over, Mallory said quietly. No, Ms. Lorraine agreed. It certainly isn't. She looked at Isaiah, still handcuffed. They're taking you to county? When he nodded, she squeezed Nia's hand. Don't worry about your daughter. She'll stay with me until Detective Ortiz sorts this out. Her eyes met Isaiah's. She won't be alone. Isaiah felt some of the tension leave his body. Ms. Lorraine had been protecting the neighborhood's children for longer than he'd been alive. Nia would be safe with her. Time to go, the officer said, leading Isaiah toward the patrol car. Daddy, Nia called out. It's okay, baby girl, he answered calmly. Ms. Lorraine's got your back until I get home. Remember what I taught you? Stay strong, Nia recited, her voice shaking but determined. Stay smart. Stay safe. That's my girl. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight as Isaiah sat slumped at his table, surrounded by a maze of CPS forms and legal documents. His eyes burned from reading the dense text, each paragraph twisted with bureaucratic language designed to confuse and intimidate. The bail bondsman had taken most of his savings, but at least he was home. The house felt wrong without Nia's presence. No Netflix shows playing in the background, no homework questions called from the living room, no teenage sighs about dinner choices, just silence and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Isaiah rubbed his temples, trying to focus on the paper in front of him. Something about a psychological evaluation and home study. The words swam together, his exhaustion making them blur. He'd been awake for nearly 40 hours straight, first in a holding cell, then dealing with the bondsman, then meeting with a public defender who seemed more interested in plea deals than justice. A faint, scratching sound made his head snap up. Most people would have dismissed it as a tree branch or settling house, but Isaiah's SEAL training had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now every nerve ending was firing. He stayed perfectly still, controlling his breathing, listening. There it was again, coming from Nia's bedroom window. Isaiah moved silently through the dark house, years of combat experience guiding his steps around creaky floorboards. He pressed himself against the wall beside Nia's window, grateful she was safe at Ms. Lorraine's tonight. The scratching continued, metal on metal, someone working at the screen. Isaiah waited, muscles coiled. But after a few seconds, the sound stopped. Footsteps crunched softly in the mulch below, moving away. He counted to 30 before approaching the window. The screen was slightly bent at one corner, the frame showing fresh scratch marks. Professional work. They'd been testing the entry point, seeing how difficult it would be to get in. Isaiah's jaw clenched. They had been watching, waiting until they thought Nia would be home. The thought of what might have happened if she'd been sleeping here made his hands shake with rage. He did another sweep of the house, checking every window and door. When he reached the front porch, a white rectangle caught his eye. A folded note had been slipped under the welcome mat. Isaiah retrieved it using a paper towel, preserving any prints. The message was typed in plain black text. "Return the phone." He sank back into his kitchen chair, the note lying on the table before him. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. This wasn't about random kidnapping. This wasn't even about him. This was about Nia's video. The footage of Sergeant Burris assaulting that teenager behind the clubhouse. The one piece of evidence they couldn't control or deny. The truth captured in high definition. Isaiah pulled out his own phone, opening the video Nia had sent him before everything went sideways. He watched again as Burris grabbed the young man, slammed him against the wall, spitting threats and racial slurs. The teen's hands were clearly empty, raised in surrender. There was no justification, no excuse, just raw abuse of power caught on camera. No wonder they were desperate to get the phone. It was the kind of footage that ended careers and triggered federal investigations. The kind that brought down not just individual officers, but entire corrupted systems. Isaiah's military training kicked in, mind shifting to tactical analysis. The attempted kidnapping, the planted knife, the CPS threats. It wasn't random chaos. It was a coordinated campaign to discredit him and gain custody of Nia, to get access to her phone and destroy the evidence. He thought about Mallory's smug smile, the judge's conveniently quick warrant, the CPS workers appearing out of nowhere. How many people were involved? How deep did this network go? The scratches on the window screen took on new meaning. They weren't just testing entry points, they were sending a message. We can get to her whenever we want. Isaiah stood and walked to Nia's empty bedroom. Her stuffed animals were arranged carefully on her bed, her school books stacked neatly on her desk. The room still smelled faintly of her cherry blossom shampoo. He thought of her face when the CPS workers grabbed her, the terror in her eyes that mirrored yesterday's attempted kidnapping. His daughter, his brave, brilliant girl who'd instinctively recognized injustice and tried to expose it, who was now a target because she dared to show the truth. He'd trained her to be strong, to stand up for what's right, but he'd never wanted her to face consequences like this. She was just 11. Her biggest worries should be homework and TikTok dances, not corrupt cops and shadowy threats. Isaiah closed her bedroom door gently, his hand lingering on the doorknob. They would be back. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but they would keep coming until they got what they wanted. They thought they could use his daughter as leverage, force him to back down. They clearly didn't know who they were dealing with. In combat, Isaiah had learned to channel fear into focus, anger into strategy. Right now, that cold clarity was settling over him like armor. They wanted to play games with paper trails and legal tricks? Fine. But the moment they decided to target his child, they'd crossed a line there was no coming back from. He returned to the kitchen table, studying the note again. Return the phone. Such a simple demand. They probably expected him to cave, to hand over the evidence in exchange for being left alone. Instead, he reached for a fresh legal pad. It was time to start mapping out every player in this twisted game. Every connection, every pressure point, every weakness. They thought they had him cornered. They were about to learn how dangerous that position could be. Ms. Lorraine's dining room looked like a war room. Papers covered the polished oak table, laptops glowed in the morning light, and coffee cups dotted any free space. The retired principal sat at the head of the table, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she studied a stack of HOA newsletters. "They've gotten sloppy," Detective Ortiz said, spreading out several police reports. Her dark circles suggested she'd been up all night reviewing files. "Look at these incident logs from the past 6 months. Burris's name appears in the initial reports, but by the time they're officially filed..." She held up 2 versions of the same document. The second was clearly sanitized. Key details missing. Isaiah leaned forward, scanning the papers. His military training helped him spot the patterns. Dates that didn't quite match, incident locations that shifted slightly, witness statements that grew vaguer with each revision. "How often does this happen?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Too often," Ortiz replied. She glanced around nervously before continuing. "Ever since Mallory got his security contract with the HOA, reports involving certain officers just change, especially ones with Burris." Theo Kim, the local journalist, typed rapidly on his laptop. His usual witty demeanor was replaced by intense focus. "The HOA's been paying Mallory's company almost triple the previous security budget," he said. "But the financial reports are weird. Lots of cash transactions, consulting fees with no clear deliverables." Ms. Lorraine removed her glasses, fixing Theo with a stern look. "Can you prove any of this?" "Not yet. But I'm pulling every public record I can find. Property deeds, business licenses, tax filings. There's a pattern here. We just need to connect the dots." Isaiah stood up, pacing the length of the dining room. The walls were covered in old class photos from Ms. Lorraine's teaching days, generations of children smiling back at him, including Nia in her 3rd grade picture, gap-toothed and beaming. His heart clenched. "We need more than papers," he said. "They're escalating. That note, the window screen, they're not stopping." "Ms." Lorraine nodded grimly. "Which is why we need to prepare the neighborhood. Not everyone's corrupt. Most folks here are good people who've been kept in the dark." "I've been thinking about that," Isaiah said. He pulled out his phone, showing them a rough diagram of the cul-de-sac. "We can set up informal training sessions. Nothing obvious, just neighbors helping neighbors with safety awareness." Ortiz raised an eyebrow. "You're going to train civilians?" "Basic stuff only. How to spot surveillance, safe routes through yards and driveways, emergency rally points. The kind of skills that might keep someone alive if things go bad." Ms. Lorraine's eyes lit up. "I know just who to start with. The Thompson sisters, both retired nurses, sharp as tacks. And Mr. Chen from the corner house. He already walks the neighborhood 3 times a day." "The morning power walking group," Theo added. "They see everything. And they all have those fancy doorbell cameras." Isaiah nodded. This was familiar territory, building a network, establishing safe houses, creating layers of protection. Just like his SEAL days, but with garden hoses and lawn furniture instead of military gear. That afternoon, Isaiah held his first safety awareness session in the Thompsons' driveway. The sisters, both in their 70s, proved to be excellent students. They picked up his hand signals quickly and already knew every squeaky gate and loose fence board in the neighborhood. Mr. Chen brought his grandson, who helped demonstrate escape routes through the connected backyards. Other neighbors drifted over, curious about the gathering. Isaiah kept it casual, framing everything as general safety tips. But he made sure they understood the underlying message. Watch out for each other, report anything suspicious, stay connected. Back at Ms. Lorraine's, Theo had set up a makeshift command center. His laptop was linked to a network of doorbell cameras, creating a surprisingly effective surveillance system. "Check this out," he said, pulling up a feed. I've got algorithms scanning for that van's plate number. They watched as various vehicles moved through the neighborhood. Soccer moms in SUVs, teenagers on bikes, delivery trucks making their rounds. Normal suburban traffic. Then Theo's laptop pinged. A white van, similar to the kidnapping vehicle, crawling past the entrance to their cul-de-sac. The image was grainy, but clear enough to catch part of the license plate. "Got you," Theo muttered, fingers flying over the keyboard. "This is the third time this van's been spotted this week. Different plate each time, but same make and model." "They're testing our defenses," Isaiah said. "Seeing what we notice, how we react." Ortiz studied the image. "I'll run these plates, but they're probably stolen or fake. These guys know how to cover their tracks." Ms. Lorraine straightened in her chair, her expression fierce. "Well, they don't know this neighborhood like we do. Every porch light, every garden hose, every nosy neighbor with a smartphone. That's our advantage." Isaiah felt a surge of gratitude for these allies. A suspended detective risking her career, a journalist diving into dark corners, a retired principal rallying her community, and now a growing network of watchful neighbors. It wasn't a SEAL team, but maybe it was exactly what they needed. The laptop pinged again. The van was making another pass. The afternoon sun beat down as Isaiah jogged along the winding suburban streets, his gray t-shirt already damp with sweat. He kept his pace steady, just another resident getting some exercise. His eyes swept the area constantly, noting security cameras, parked cars, and the positions of any neighbors outside. The model home stood at the end of an unfinished cul-de-sac in Phase 3, surrounded by dirt lots and construction equipment. A large "Coming Soon" sign swayed in the breeze. The house itself was perfect. Fresh paint, manicured lawn, staged furniture visible through spotless windows. Too perfect. Isaiah slowed his jog, pretending to catch his breath. He checked his watch, making a show of timing his heart rate while actually scanning for surveillance. The house had cameras, but they were just props. Plastic shells meant to deter vandals. The real security was more subtle. Fresh tire tracks in the mud, footprints on the front mat, a garden hose recently moved. Someone had been here. Recently. He circled to the back, as if cooling down with a walk. The sliding glass door had a standard contractor's lockbox. Isaiah pulled out his phone, appearing to check messages while his other hand worked the box. 30 seconds later, he was inside. The interior was cool and silent. Staged furniture filled the main rooms, plush sofas, artwork on walls, fake tablets on coffee tables. Everything designed to help potential buyers envision their perfect suburban life. But there were other details that didn't fit the model home image. In the dining room, 6 folding chairs were stacked against the wall, zip ties and duct tape rolls placed nearby. HOA volunteer patrol vests hung on hooks, their reflective stripes dull in the filtered light. A dry erase board dominated one wall, covered in what looked like patrol schedules. Isaiah moved closer, memorizing the details. Times, routes, names, all carefully coded, but clear enough if you knew what to look for. Maintenance checks at the clubhouse, equipment inspections of the pool area, inventory reviews in specific garages. The board even marked camera blind spots and which homeowners were problematic. His jaw tightened as he spotted his own address, marked with a red X. In the kitchen, energy bar wrappers and coffee cups filled the trash. The sink had water drops. Someone had used it within the last hour. The garage held more equipment, flashlights, walkie-talkies, and a rack of what looked like security batons. This wasn't just a meeting spot. It was a staging area. Isaiah pulled a small digital recorder from his sock. He'd borrowed it from Theo, tiny but powerful, with enough battery life for 48 hours of continuous recording. He placed it carefully inside a hollow curtain rod, angling it toward the dining room where the planning seemed to happen. Voices outside made him freeze. Two men walking past, their conversation drifting through the windows. Lakeview transfer needs to happen soon. Boss wants that seal causing problems. Take care of it after. Their words faded as they passed. Isaiah remained still, controlling his breathing like he'd learned in the teams. When the voices disappeared completely, he did one final sweep of the house. He needed to make sure nothing was disturbed, no sign of his presence left behind. The garage door rumbled nearby. Someone coming home next door. Time to move. Isaiah slipped out the back, circling around to the front, as if finishing his cool-down walk. He started jogging again, his shirt now genuinely soaked with sweat. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawns. A patrol car crept along the street, moving slower than normal neighborhood speed. Isaiah recognized the driver, one of Baress's regulars. He kept his pace steady, gave a friendly wave like any law-abiding resident would. The patrol car's window rolled down. "Hot day for a run," the officer called out. "Best time to burn calories," Isaiah replied, with an easy smile that didn't reach his eyes. He made a show of checking his fitness watch. "Trying to get my heart rate up." The officer stared at him a moment longer, then rolled up his window and drove on. Isaiah maintained his jogging form until the car turned the corner. His mind was already racing through the implications of what he'd found. The model home was proof. This wasn't just a few corrupt cops or overzealous HOA members. This was an organized operation using the neighborhood's own security systems against its residents. The Neighborhood Watch was really a cover for something much darker. And whatever this Lakeview transfer was, it couldn't be good. Isaiah knew Lakeview Court, a quiet street on the other side of the subdivision. Mostly short-term rentals and vacation properties, perfect for moving people through without attracting attention. He thought of the zip ties in the model home, the batons in the garage, the carefully marked patrol routes. They had turned this peaceful suburb into their own private hunting ground, and they were getting bolder. His jogging route took him past Ms. Lorraine's house. Through the window he could see her and Theo still working at the dining room table. Soon he'd share what he'd found, add it to their growing web of evidence. But first, he needed to check on Nia. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sprinklers hissed on perfectly manicured lawns. Children played in driveways while parents chatted on front porches. A perfect suburban evening. But Isaiah knew better now. Behind those perfect facades, a war was brewing, and he intended to win it. The setting sun painted long shadows across Lakeview Court as Isaiah and Detective Ortiz sat in her unmarked car, watching the short-term rental at number 347. The house looked like all the others. Beige siding, pristine landscaping, a Homes by Harrison sign swaying gently in the evening breeze. "Movement," Ortiz whispered, adjusting her binoculars. A white landscaping truck with Green Valley Services on the side turned onto the street, moving slowly past the perfectly manicured lawns. Isaiah's muscles tensed. The truck matched the description from his recorder at the model home, right down to the dented rear bumper. "That's them!" The garage door hummed open, and the truck backed in smoothly. Before it closed, Isaiah caught a glimpse of two men in security uniforms inside. His jaw clenched as he heard muffled voices, young voices, from the truck's cargo area. "3 minutes," he said quietly. "Then I go in through the back. You bring the car around when I signal." Ortiz nodded, her face grim. "Be careful. These aren't just thugs. They've got training." "So do I." Isaiah slipped out of the car, moving through the growing darkness like a shadow. The houses here were close together, their privacy fences creating a maze of narrow corridors. Perfect cover for someone who knew how to use it. He scaled the back fence easily, landing in soft mulch. Through the garage's side window, he could see the guards unloading their cargo. 4 teenagers, hands zip-tied, eyes wide with fear. One girl couldn't be much older than Nia. The first guard headed toward the house's interior door, leaving his partner to watch the kids. Isaiah's window was opening. He moved to the garage's side door, where he'd earlier picked the lock during his recon. 3 quick breaths, centering himself. Then he moved. The door opened silently. The remaining guard turned at the sound of Isaiah's footsteps. But too late. Isaiah's hand clamped over his mouth, while his other arm locked around the man's throat. A blood choke, cutting off oxygen to the brain. The guard tried to reach for his weapon, but Isaiah's grip was perfect. 8 seconds later, the man went limp. Isaiah lowered him quietly to the floor, quickly securing him with his own zip ties. He turned to the teenagers, pressing a finger to his lips. Their eyes were huge, but they nodded. The interior door opened. "Hey, Mike, where's the—" Isaiah was already moving. He caught the second guard's wrist as it reached for a concealed weapon, twisting until tendons strained. His other hand drove up into the man's solar plexus, forcing out his breath in a whoosh. A quick sweep took the guard's legs out, and Isaiah followed him down, controlling the impact to minimize noise. Another set of zip ties, and both threats were neutralized. He made quick work of freeing the teenagers, using his pocket knife to cut their bonds. "Detective Ortiz is bringing a car around," he whispered. "When I open the garage door, run to it. Don't stop. Don't look back. Understand?" They nodded, still too scared to speak. Isaiah hit the garage door button and positioned himself to cover their escape. The door lifted, revealing Ortiz's car idling at the curb. Emergency lights dark. The teens bolted for it, moving impressively fast for being cramped in a truck. Isaiah did a final sweep of the garage, collecting the guards' phones and weapons. Evidence. He could hear Ortiz already calling it in as he jogged to the car. "This is Detective Ortiz. I need units at 347 Lakeview Court. 2 suspects detained, multiple victims recovered." Theo Kim's live stream captured it all from a nearby parked car. The teens' rescue, the license plates, the house number. Within hours, social media exploded. The footage spread like wildfire, accompanied by demands for investigation and justice. Later that night, Isaiah stood in his kitchen, loading the dishwasher while Nia did her homework at the table. The sound of car doors made him tense, but when he looked out the window, he smiled. All along the cul-de-sac, porch lights were coming on. One by one, then in clusters, until the whole street glowed with warm light. A clear message. "We see you. We stand with you." Ms. Lorraine appeared on his front step with a casserole. Then the Martinez family brought cookies. The Patels arrived with butter chicken. Soon, his counter was covered with food. A suburban potluck of solidarity. "Dad?" Nia looked up from her math worksheet. "Can we put our light on, too?" Isaiah flipped the switch, adding their porch to the constellation of lights. Then he turned on the radio, something with a good beat, and held out his hand to his daughter. "Come here, baby girl." Nia's face lit up. She took his hand, giggling as he twirled her around the kitchen. They danced between the island and the refrigerator, making up silly moves, laughing at their shadows on the wall. For a moment, they were just a father and daughter again, not victims or targets or symbols. Through the window, Isaiah could see neighbors gathering on porches, chatting and pointing at the patrol cars that kept cruising past. Let them watch. Let them see that their intimidation wasn't working. The community was awake now, and standing together. But those were thoughts for tomorrow. Right now, all that mattered was Nia's laughter as he dipped her dramatically between the sink and the stove, her eyes bright and happy for the first time since that Sunday afternoon that felt so long ago. The porch lights kept glowing, a constellation of defiance in the suburban night, as father and daughter danced in their kitchen, reclaiming their joy one step at a time. The morning sun streamed through Isaiah's kitchen windows as he flipped pancakes, trying to keep things normal for Nia's sake. She sat at the counter, drowsy but smiling, her math homework spread out beside her plate. "Can you help me check these fractions after breakfast?" she asked, drizzling syrup over her stack. "Of course, baby girl." Isaiah slid another golden pancake onto his own plate. "But let's eat first while they're hot." His phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. Frowning, he picked it up. Text messages flooded in, from Ms. Lorraine, from neighbors, from Theo, all with the same urgent tone. "Check your email." The HOA newsletter had arrived early today, with a bold headline, "Dangerous vigilante threatens neighborhood safety." Isaiah's stomach clenched as he scrolled through the article. There was his service photo, his SEAL team credentials, information that should have been classified. Carefully selected excerpts painted a picture of violence. Specialized in close-quarters combat. Multiple high-risk operations. Trained in lethal force techniques. "Dad?" Nia's voice was small. "Why are you making that face?" Before he could answer, someone knocked at the front door. Detective Ortiz stood there, her expression grim. She held up an official-looking envelope. "I wanted you to hear this from me first." Inside his living room, she laid out the documents. Judge Halbrook, who lived just 3 streets over in one of the biggest houses in the subdivision, had signed an emergency restraining order. Isaiah was banned from approaching within 500 feet of the HOA clubhouse, the model homes, or any HOA board member's residence. "This effectively boxes you into just your house and immediate neighborhood," Ortiz explained, her frustration evident. "They're claiming it's for community safety after your unauthorized raid last night." "Unauthorized?" Isaiah's voice was quiet but sharp. "We rescued kidnapped children." "I know, but they're spinning it. Mallory's saying they were runaways being temporarily housed for their own protection. The guards are claiming you assaulted them without cause." More knocking. This time it was a CPS worker, a different one from before, with another stack of papers. A hearing had been scheduled for the following week to evaluate Nia's placement. Given the recent pattern of volatile behavior, the worker read from her notes, and the subject's documented history of combat-related incidents, we need to assess the stability of the home environment. Isaiah's hands wanted to shake, but he kept them steady. Combat-related incidents? Your military file indicates multiple high-intensity operations with potential for psychological trauma. Combined with these recent vigilante activities, you mean rescuing my daughter from kidnappers? Stopping a trafficking operation? Those allegations haven't been proven, Mr. Cole. What we have documented is you assaulting neighborhood watch volunteers and breaking into a private residence. Through the kitchen doorway, he could see Nia pretending to focus on her homework. But her shoulders were tense. She was hearing every word. His phone buzzed again. The HOA had sent another email blast, this one with excerpts from his file. Mission reports, psychiatric evaluations after tough operations, all carefully selected and taken out of context to paint him as unstable. Dangerous. "Where did they get these records?" he asked Ortiz quietly. She shook her head. "We're looking into it. The leak had to come from someone with high-level access." The CPS worker cleared her throat. "Mr. Cole, we'll need you to sign here acknowledging receipt of the hearing notice." Isaiah signed, his signature precise and controlled despite his anger. The worker left, and Ortiz lingered for a moment. "They're trying to isolate you," she said softly. "Make you look dangerous, so nobody questions what happens next." "I know." He walked her to the door. "Thank you for coming in person." After she left, Isaiah stood in his living room, reading through the restraining order again. The boundaries were precisely drawn to cut him off from investigating further. No clubhouse, no model homes, No approaching board members for questions. Nia appeared in the doorway, her face worried. "Dad? Are they going to take me away?" "No, baby." He went to her, kneeling to meet her eyes. "I won't let that happen." "But the judge said—" "The judge doesn't know what we know. Remember what I taught you about bullies?" A small smile. "They want you to feel alone. But you're not alone if you stand together." "That's right." He hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Now go finish your breakfast. Those pancakes won't eat themselves." Back in the kitchen, Isaiah watched Nia pick at her food, trying to act normal. His phone kept buzzing with messages from concerned neighbors, but also a few ugly ones. "Keep your violence away from our kids." "Go back where you came from. This isn't a war zone." He took the restraining order from the counter, folded it precisely, and slipped it into his pocket. They wanted him contained, controlled, discredited. They were trying to paint him as the threat, while their own crimes went uninvestigated. His jaw set as he stared out at the quiet street, where just last night porch lights had glowed in solidarity. "They want me boxed in." The HOA newsletter lay open on his counter, his service photo staring back at him. But they'd made a mistake in their careful selection of his file. They'd reminded everyone of exactly who he was, a man trained to overcome exactly these kinds of tactical challenges. A man who'd spent his career thinking his way around obstacles and through enemy defenses. Let them try to box him in. They'd forgotten the most important part of his training. A seal was most dangerous when cornered. The evening air hung thick with humidity as Isaiah crouched behind a row of crepe myrtles near the clubhouse pool. Security lights cast long shadows across the deck, and the steady hum of pool pumps masked his movements. He'd studied the layout for days. The equipment gate hidden behind the shower building, the maintenance tunnel that ran beneath the clubhouse proper. The restraining order made this risky, but he needed proof of what they were doing down here. The lock on the equipment gate yielded easily to his picks. Isaiah slipped inside, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. Pool chemicals and damp concrete filled his nostrils. Racks of cleaning supplies lined the walls, and coiled pool hoses hung like sleeping snakes. The maintenance tunnel entrance gaped ahead, a square concrete throat leading under the clubhouse. Isaiah moved silently, years of training taking over. Every shadow could hide a guard, every corner a camera. Voices echoed from deeper in the tunnel. Isaiah pressed against the wall, controlling his breathing. Two men approached, their footsteps bouncing off the concrete. "Another pickup tomorrow. Boss wants the basement cleared by then." "What about the seal problem?" "Being handled. Judge's order keeps him away, and if he shows up—" Isaiah waited until they passed his position, then struck. His hand clamped over the rear man's mouth, while his other arm locked around the throat. The guard went down silently. The second man spun, drawing a collapsible baton. It whistled through the air where Isaiah's head had been. He snatched a pool skimmer pole from the wall, using it to parry the next strike. The aluminum shaft rang with each block. His attacker pressed forward, forcing Isaiah back toward the chlorinator housing. The confined space-limited movement, making the baton deadlier. Isaiah felt the edge of the chemical tank behind him. The guard grinned, thinking he had Isaiah cornered. "Got nowhere to go, hero." Isaiah dropped suddenly, sweeping the skimmer pole at knee level. As the man stumbled, Isaiah surged up, driving his knee into the guard's ribs and slamming him back against the chlorinator. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs. Before he could recover, Isaiah spotted movement from the corner of his eye. A third guard charged from a side passage, swinging a heavy flashlight. Isaiah ducked, grabbing one of the lane ropes coiled on a nearby hook. As the guard's momentum carried him past, Isaiah whipped the rope around his neck and pulled tight. The guard thrashed, dropping the flashlight. It clattered across the concrete, beam spinning crazily. Isaiah maintained the chokehold until the struggling stopped, then lowered the unconscious man carefully. But something felt wrong. The first guard he'd taken down was gone. A high-pitched electronic whine pierced the tunnel. Emergency lights strobed to life, painting the concrete walls in flashing red. Someone had triggered a silent alarm. Isaiah sprinted for the exit, but police sirens already wailed outside. He changed direction, heading deeper into the tunnel network. Maybe he could find another way out through the clubhouse itself. Heavy boots thundered above. They were sealing off the building. Isaiah tried a maintenance door, but it was locked. The tunnel ahead ended in a grated storm drain, too small to squeeze through. "Freeze! Hands where we can see them!" Flashlight beams stabbed through the darkness. Officers in tactical gear blocked both ends of the tunnel, weapons drawn. Isaiah raised his hands slowly, mind racing. No clean way out of this one. "On your knees, now!" He complied, keeping his movements deliberate. They rushed him, roughly forcing him face down. Cold handcuffs bit into his wrists. "Isaiah Cole, you're under arrest for criminal trespassing, assault, and violation of a restraining order." They hauled him to his feet. His ribs ached where he'd taken a hit during the fight. Blood trickled from a split lip. Through the glass doors of the clubhouse lobby, he glimpsed Mallory watching with barely concealed satisfaction. Behind him stood Sergeant Burris, arms crossed and smirking. The officers marched Isaiah to a waiting patrol car. Neighbors gathered on their lawns to watch, faces illuminated by the emergency lights. Some filmed with phones, others turned away. At the station, they put him in a holding cell. His requests for a phone call were ignored. Hours crept by under harsh fluorescent lights. Finally, his phone buzzed in the property bag on the desk outside his cell. The booking officer glanced at it, then at Isaiah. "Text from someone named Lorraine," he said, reading the screen. The color drained from his face. "You need to see this." He held up the phone. Isaiah's heart stopped as he read Ms. Lorraine's message. They took Nia from school pickup. Woman claimed to be CPS. White crossover, magnetic sign. Lost them at Sound Wall. "I'm so sorry." Isaiah's hands gripped the cell bars until his knuckles went white. While they'd kept him trapped here, they'd gone after his daughter. Again. The booking officer studied Isaiah's face. Something in his expression must have registered because he stepped back, one hand moving to his weapon. But Isaiah remained perfectly still, his military training asserting itself. Panic wouldn't help Nia. He needed to think tactically, find a way out. His eyes tracked across the holding area, noting the fire suppression system, the hinges on the cell door, the officer's duty belt. They thought the cell would hold him. They thought wrong. Nia needed him, and no cage built by men would keep a father from protecting his child. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Isaiah began to plan. The fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly in the holding cell, their harsh glare making Isaiah's eyes ache. He sat motionless on the metal bench, appearing defeated while his mind raced through escape scenarios. The booking officer had returned to his paperwork, occasionally glancing up at Isaiah with nervous eyes. Two patrol officers walked past, their conversation drifting through the corridor. "Mallory wants extra units at the clubhouse basement tonight. Says they're moving some sensitive materials. That HOA guy gives me the creeps. What's he even doing down there?" Isaiah's jaw tightened. The basement. That's where they'd taken Nia. His fingers brushed against his belt, which they'd foolishly left him wearing after booking. Standard-issue tactical belt, the kind he'd trained with countless times. The kind with a reinforced tip perfect for jamming door mechanisms. He studied the cell's layout again. Fire sprinkler overhead. Emergency exit door 30 feet down the corridor. Two officers on duty. both looking tired at the end of their shift. The holding area's fire system was linked to the main station alarms. One trigger would set off the whole building. Isaiah stood slowly, stretching as if stiff from sitting. The movement brought him directly under the sprinkler head. He removed his belt with deliberate casualness, as if adjusting it for comfort. "Hey," the booking officer called, "keep that belt where I can see it." Isaiah held up his hands apologetically, then made a show of threading the belt back through his loops. But as he raised his arms, he whipped the reinforced tip upward, striking the sprinkler head with precision. Water exploded downward as alarms shrieked through the building. The booking officer leaped up, cursing as his paperwork scattered. The second officer rushed to help, both momentarily distracted by the chaos. Isaiah was already moving. He'd slipped the belt free again, reaching through the cell bars to jam the reinforced end into the electronic lock, just as the emergency systems triggered a power reset. The door clicked open in the confusion. He burst from the cell, using the water spray as cover. The officers shouted behind him, but Isaiah was focused on the emergency exit. 3 long strides brought him there. He shoulder-checked through the door into the rear parking lot, rain mixing with the sprinkler water that soaked his clothes. A police radio crackled at his feet, dropped by one of the officers responding to another call. Isaiah snatched it up as he ran, already tuning to the frequency Ms. Lorraine used for her neighborhood watch network, the one they'd set up after the first kidnapping attempt. "Ms. Lorraine, you copy?" he panted, ducking between parked cruisers. Static crackled. Then her voice came through. "Isaiah? Lord have mercy. Are you out? Where's my baby girl? Talk to me." White crossover took her right from the pickup lane. Magnetic sign said Child Services, but the font was wrong. I followed them until they hit that sound wall cut through by the clubhouse. Then nothing. Isaiah vaulted a low fence, ignoring the protest from his bruised ribs. "You sure about the clubhouse?" Theo's been monitoring their security cameras. Saw them take her inside through the service entrance. Basement level. Sirens wailed as officers discovered his escape. Isaiah cut through backyards, staying in the shadows of privacy fences and garden sheds. The rain worked in his favor, reducing visibility and masking sound. "Ms. Lorraine, I need a distraction. Something to pull their attention front side." "Already on it, baby. Half the neighborhood's about to show up for an emergency HOA meeting. They won't be able to ignore that many witnesses." Isaiah allowed himself a grim smile. "Ms. Lorraine was a force of nature when she got moving. He could picture her rallying the neighbors, especially after what happened at school pickup. He reached the wooded buffer behind the clubhouse complex. The storm drain culvert gaped ahead, a concrete tunnel running under the parking lot into the building's foundation, the same drainage system he'd studied on the building plans. Thunder rumbled overhead as rain pelted the pavement. Isaiah's clothes clung to him, cold and heavy. His body ached from the earlier fight in the maintenance tunnel, and his split lip throbbed. But none of that mattered. Nia was waiting. He keyed the radio one last time. "Going in through the culvert. If you don't hear from me in 20 minutes, we'll hear from you." Ms. Lorraine cut him off firmly. "Those devils picked the wrong father to cross. Now, go get our girl." Isaiah tucked the radio into his waistband and crouched at the culvert entrance. Water rushed past his feet, carrying leaves and debris. The tunnel stretched ahead into darkness, barely large enough to crawl through. At its end lay the clubhouse's foundation, and somewhere inside, his daughter. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. The rage that had been building since he read Ms. Lorraine's text crystallized into cold, tactical focus. He was no longer the concerned neighbor they'd tried to paint as a vigilante. No longer the troublemaker they'd tried to cage. He was what he'd trained to be. what Nia needed him to be. And in the growing storm, as thunder crashed overhead and rain pounded the earth, Isaiah Cole dropped to his hands and knees and began crawling into the dark culvert. Rain drummed against umbrellas as neighbors gathered in the pocket park near the clubhouse. Ms. Lorraine stood on a picnic table, her voice carrying over the storm. The glow of phone flashlights dotted the darkness like fireflies. "They think we'll stay quiet," she called out. "They think we'll let them take our children. Not tonight." Theo Kim's laptop glowed from beneath a park pavilion as he set up his live stream equipment. His hands shook slightly, but his voice was steady as he tested the mic. Going live in 3, 2, 1. This is Theo Kim, reporting live from Oak Hills subdivision. We're witnessing an unprecedented community response to allegations of kidnapping and corruption within local law enforcement and HOA leadership. Cars lined both sides of the street now. Karen Mitchell, who taught 3rd grade with Ms. Lorraine years ago, distributed printed photos of Mallory and Burris. Other teachers from the elementary school joined her, their faces grim with purpose. 3 retired Marines in reflective vests directed traffic at key intersections, ensuring emergency vehicles could still get through while blocking obvious escape routes from the clubhouse. They moved with quiet efficiency, communicating via hand signals learned decades ago. "Look at this turnout," Ms. Lorraine said into Theo's camera. "These are real neighbors, real community, not Mallory's thugs with their fake watches and badges." Thunder cracked overhead. More cars arrived, parking along the curved streets. Mothers who'd witnessed Nia's abduction from the school pickup line held handmade signs. "Where is Nia?" And "Burris and Mallory, criminals with badges." Detective Ortiz's unmarked car idled at the edge of the gathering. She'd changed into civilian clothes after her suspension, but her sharp eyes still scanned the crowd with professional attention. When Ms. Lorraine approached her window, she passed over a folded paper. "Complete roster," Ortiz said quietly. "Every off-duty officer Mallory's got in there tonight. Plus, building access codes. They changed them after Isaiah's last attempt." Ms. Lorraine tucked the paper into her raincoat. "They'll crucify you for this." "They were going to anyway." Ortiz's smile was bitter. "Might as well make it count." The crowd had swelled to over 100 now, despite the worsening weather. Theo's live stream counter ticked up as local news stations picked up his feed. Comments flooded in. "Where are the real police? This is happening in our neighborhood. Stand strong." Mr. Patterson, who'd served as a combat medic, set up a first aid station under another pavilion. "Just in case," he said grimly, laying out supplies. His wife coordinated with other neighbors to form a communication chain. Any suspicious movement would be reported instantly through their network of porch cameras and phone trees. Ms. Lorraine's phone buzzed. A text from Isaiah. "In position. Keep them focused front." She squared her shoulders and walked to where Theo was filming. "Time to name names," she announced. "Every person involved in this corruption. Every badge number. Every address. Let's see how they like being watched." As she began speaking, her clear voice carried across the park. She listed dates, incidents, connections, years of observed patterns now laid bare. The live stream comments exploded as viewers recognized names, made connections. Officer Michael Reed, badge 22274, who parks his patrol car behind the clubhouse every Tuesday night. Judge William Halbrook, who signed every warrant Burris requested while taking HOA kickbacks for his summer house. Dennis Cooper, who drives the white van with magnetic business signs, changed weekly. Each name landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading through the crowd. People nodded in recognition, filled in details, added their own observations to the growing record. Theo's camera captured it all. "The view count is over 10,000, he whispered to Ms. Lorraine during a pause. "Local stations are picking it up. They can't ignore this anymore." More thunder rolled across the sky. The rain fell harder, but no one moved to leave. If anything, the crowd grew more determined. Parents who'd lost children to suspicious CPS calls found their voices. Teenagers who'd been harassed by Mallory's patrols stepped forward to speak. "Keep it peaceful," Ms. Lorraine reminded them between testimonies. "But keep it loud. Keep it visible. They need to know we see them." Detective Ortiz slipped through the crowd, passing more information to key people. Neighbors she'd vetted who could be trusted to share it responsibly. Building layouts, patrol patterns, security blind spots. In the storm drain culvert beneath their feet, Isaiah felt the vibrations of the gathering above. The chain he'd taken from the pool pump was cold around his fist. Water trickled past him in the darkness as he counted breaths. Waiting. He thought of Nia's smile that morning before school, of her brave kick at her kidnappers during the first attempt, of her voice calling, "Daddy!" as the fake CPS worker dragged her away. "I'm coming, baby girl," he whispered, barely audible above the sound of water and rain. "Just hold on." The chain clinked softly as he adjusted his grip. Above, Ms. Lorraine's voice rang out, keeping the attention where he needed it, away from the service entrance he'd soon breach. Thunder crashed again, closer now, as if nature itself was building toward this confrontation. Isaiah pressed his forehead against the cool concrete of the culvert. "Time to end it," he whispered. Then he began his careful advance through the darkness, toward whatever waited in the clubhouse basement. The clubhouse basement smelled of chlorine and mildew. Dim fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting sharp shadows between stacked folding chairs and abandoned pool equipment. Isaiah moved like a ghost through the maze of storage, the chain from the pool pump coiled around his right fist. Two guards lounged near the stairs, trading jokes about the crowd outside. Their laughter died when the lights went out. Isaiah had found the breaker box first. "Check it," one guard muttered. Footsteps approached Isaiah's position. The chain whipped out in the darkness, wrapping around the first guard's wrist. Isaiah yanked, sending the man face first into a stack of chairs. The crash echoed through the basement as metal chairs clattered across concrete. "Jimmy?" The second guard's flashlight beam cut through the darkness. "What the—" Isaiah was already moving. He slid between storage racks, the chain now gripped at both ends. The flashlight beam swept past him, revealing glimpses of HOA safety vests and zip ties scattered across a folding table. The guard's radio crackled. "Basement, report." Isaiah struck before he could respond. The chain whipped across the guard's knuckles, sending the flashlight spinning. In the strobing light, Isaiah caught glimpses of the fight, his elbow driving up under the guard's chin, the chain wrapping around a forearm, the sharp crack of bone. The guard's scream was cut short by Isaiah's palm strike to the throat. As he crumpled, Isaiah stripped away his taser and radio, clicking off the squawking transmission. Boots thundered on the stairs. More flashlight beams stabbed through the darkness. Isaiah melted behind a rack of pool loungers as three more figures entered the basement. "Spread out," a familiar voice ordered. "Sergeant Burris." "He's down here somewhere." Isaiah counted footsteps, tracking positions. The chain dragged silently across the floor as he circled behind them. The first guard went down without a sound, the chain crushing his windpipe. The second managed half a shout before Isaiah drove him backward into the concrete wall, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. "There!" Burress's flashlight caught Isaiah in its beam. The baton was already swinging. Isaiah snatched a pool skimmer pole from a rack, catching the baton's strike. The aluminum shaft rang like a bell. He spun the pole in a tight arc, forcing Burress back toward the stacked chair carts. "Should have stayed in your lane," Burress snarled, pressing forward with vicious baton strikes. "Known your place." Isaiah's response was coldly professional. He deflected another strike, then rammed the pole's end into Burress's gut. As the sergeant doubled over, Isaiah hooked the pole behind his knee and pulled. Burress crashed into the chair cart, metal frames clattering. His baton skittered across the floor. But he came up laughing, ugly and raw. "That little girl of yours," he spat blood, "she's gonna learn what happens to people who don't respect the natural order." Isaiah's control cracked. The chain whipped out, catching Burress across the face. The sergeant reeled but kept his feet, throwing wild punches that Isaiah slipped past. "You ain't special," Burress taunted. "Just another—" Isaiah silenced the slur with 3 precise strikes: ribs, kidney, jaw. Each impact carried the full weight of his training, calculated to inflict maximum damage without killing. Burress staggered into another stack of chairs, sending them avalanching across the floor. The noise was deafening in the confined space. He tried to reach for his backup piece, but Isaiah was faster. The chain wrapped around Burress's gun hand. One sharp twist, and the bones in his wrist shattered. The sergeant's scream echoed off the concrete walls. Isaiah moved in close, voice deadly quiet. "I could kill you right now, but my daughter's watching those cameras. She's seen enough violence." Instead, he drove his knee up into Burress's solar plexus, followed by an elbow strike to the base of his skull. The sergeant collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Isaiah zip-tied him face down, using the sergeant's own cuffs to secure his ankles. The basement had fallen silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of the crowd outside. He did a quick sweep, securing the other guards. Most were still breathing, injured but alive. He collected phones and weapons, dropping them into a chlorine bucket. That's when he heard it. A muffled cry from upstairs, near the auditorium. Nia's voice. Isaiah checked his watch. Less than 2 minutes had passed since he entered the basement. The sound of the fight wouldn't have carried far through the concrete walls and the storm outside. He still had surprise on his side. He kept the chain wrapped around his fist as he moved toward the stairs, every sense alert for more threats. The skimmer pole had cracked during the fight with Burress, but he kept it anyway. Up ahead, the stairwell light spilled down into the basement like an invitation. Nia cried out again, closer now. Isaiah could hear the fear in her voice, but also defiance. "That's my girl," he thought. "Keep fighting." He took the stairs 2 at a time, staying close to the wall where the steps were less likely to creak. The chain dragged silently beside him, ready for what waited above. At the top of the stairs, he paused to listen. Movement in the auditorium, multiple voices, and Nia, somewhere near the balcony that overlooked the main floor. Isaiah drew in a slow breath, centering himself. The basement fight had been necessarily brutal, but controlled. What came next would require even more precision, because now his daughter could see him. And some lessons couldn't be untaught. He eased the door open, scanning for threats. The auditorium lights were dim, but he could make out shapes moving near the AV booth. One of them had Nia. The auditorium's dim lighting cast long shadows across the AV balcony. Isaiah's boots made no sound on the carpeted stairs as he climbed, keeping close to the wall. His shoulder throbbed where Burress's baton had connected, but he pushed the pain aside. Through the darkness, he could make out 2 figures near the sound booth, Mallory's bulk and Nia's smaller frame. "Daddy!" Nia's voice cracked with fear and relief. Mallory yanked her closer, pressing a pistol against her temple. "That's far enough, Chief." His voice dripped with false courtesy. "Let's be professional about this." Isaiah stopped 10 feet away, hands raised. Blood from the basement fight had dried on his knuckles. The chain was still wrapped around his right fist, hidden behind his leg. "You're done, Mallory," Isaiah said quietly. "Federal marshals are outside. Detective Ortiz made the call. Mallory's laugh echoed off the high ceiling. You think I don't have friends in the federal building? This ends exactly how I say it ends. He tightened his grip on Nia. Your choice. Walk away now, or watch what happens next. Isaiah's eyes met his daughter's. In the dim light, he could see tears on her cheeks, but her jaw was set in that stubborn way she got from him. They had practiced this, turned it into a game during quieter days. Nia, he said softly, remember our kitchen dancing? Her eyes widened slightly. She knew what came next. Noodle bones. Nia went completely limp, dropping through Mallory's grip like water. The sudden dead weight pulled his gun hand down just enough. Isaiah was already moving. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. White-hot pain blazed across Isaiah's shoulder as the bullet grazed him. But momentum carried him forward, the chain unwrapping from his fist in a silver arc. It caught Mallory across the face, snapping his head back. The gun clattered to the balcony floor. Nia rolled away, scrambling behind a row of chairs. Mallory recovered faster than Isaiah expected, charging forward with a roar. They crashed into the soundboard, knobs and sliders snapping under their weight. Isaiah drove his knee up, but Mallory caught it, using his bigger size to slam Isaiah back against the railing. The metal rail dug into Isaiah's spine. Far below, he could see phone lights from the crowd outside, Theo's live stream capturing everything. Mallory's hands locked around his throat. You should have stayed in your lane, Mallory growled. Known your place in the natural order. Isaiah's vision started to darken, but he'd been in worse holds, against better fighters. He let his body go slack, just like he'd taught Nia. Mallory's grip loosened for a fraction of a second, expecting resistance. That's all Isaiah needed. He snapped his head forward, crushing Mallory's nose. As the bigger man staggered back, Isaiah spun him, slamming his face into the rail once, twice. Blood sprayed across the polished metal. Mallory threw wild elbows, catching Isaiah in his wounded shoulder. The pain almost dropped him, but he could hear Nia's frightened breathing nearby, and that was enough. Isaiah locked his arms around Mallory's throat, applying pressure to the carotid arteries, not enough to kill, just to end it. Mallory thrashed, trying to break free, but Isaiah's grip was perfected by years of training. Within seconds, the bigger man's struggles weakened. It's over, Isaiah said quietly. The world you built here? It's done. Mallory sagged in his arms just as the auditorium doors burst open below. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. Federal marshals! Everyone down! Isaiah eased Mallory to the floor, securing him with zip ties. Only then did he turn to Nia, who launched herself into his arms. I knew you'd come, she whispered against his chest. Always, he promised, holding her tight. Boots thundered up the balcony stairs. Isaiah kept his hands visible as federal agents swarmed the space, securing Mallory and clearing the area. Detective Ortiz appeared, badge glinting in the emergency lights. Basement's secure, she reported. But you need to see this. Isaiah lifted Nia, carrying her down the stairs as agents led a handcuffed Mallory past. The main auditorium was filled with law enforcement now, processing evidence and taking statements. Ortiz led them to a supply closet near the stage. Inside, huddled on gymnastics mats, were 4 terrified kids, all reported missing from nearby neighborhoods over the past month. The youngest couldn't have been more than 7. They were going to move them tonight, Ortiz said quietly. If we hadn't stopped it. Isaiah tightened his hold on Nia. Through the lobby windows he could see neighbors gathering on the pool deck, holding blankets and water bottles. Ms. Lorraine directed people with calm authority, creating a safe space for the rescued children. Theo's livestream captured it all, the children being led to safety, Mallory and his men in cuffs, the community coming together. The truth, unavoidable and undeniable, broadcast to thousands. Nia touched the graze on his shoulder. "You're hurt. Just a scratch." Isaiah kissed her forehead. "Nothing that won't heal." They walked out together into the cool night air. The storm had passed, leaving behind that particular stillness that follows violence. On the pool deck, blankets were being wrapped around shivering shoulders. Parents were arriving, crying out in relief as they found their missing children. Nia's grip on his hand tightened. "Can we go home now?" "Soon," Isaiah promised. But first, there were statements to give, evidence to process, a network to dismantle. The night wasn't over yet. Sunlight dappled the neighborhood green, where smoke from half a dozen grills drifted lazily through the warm air. Children darted between picnic tables decorated with red checkered cloths, their laughter mixing with the soul music flowing from portable speakers. The transformation from just weeks ago was striking, where silence and fear had ruled. Now life and voices filled every corner. Isaiah stood at one of the grills, expertly flipping burgers while chatting with neighbors. His shoulder had healed well, though he still felt a twinge when the weather changed. The physical scars were fading faster than the memories. Ms. Lorraine approached, carrying a fresh pitcher of lemonade. "Channel 7 just ran another segment on the indictments," she said, pouring him a glass. "Mallory's looking at 20 years minimum. Burris, too." Isaiah nodded, accepting the drink. The FBI's evidence was pretty clear once they started digging. Amazing what people record on their HOA accounts. 5 volunteers took plea deals, Ms. Lorraine continued, her voice carrying that teacher's precision. Rolling over on the whole operation. Judge Holbrook couldn't resign fast enough once those connections came to light. A burst of childish squealing drew their attention. Near the playground, Nia was teaching younger kids how to do cartwheels, her confidence restored after weeks of healing. She caught Isaiah watching and waved, her smile bright enough to eclipse any lingering shadows. "The CPS reforms are official," Ms. Lorraine said. "New protocols for verification, body cameras required for all removals. They're calling it the Cole Initiative." Isaiah shook his head. That was all Detective Ortiz. Her testimony broke it wide open. "Speaking of which," Ms. Lorraine gestured toward the clubhouse, where Ortiz was arriving in civilian clothes, a box tucked under her arm. She'd been reinstated with commendations after the investigation cleared her. The clubhouse itself had undergone a transformation. The basement where children had been held was now sealed off, but the annex had been converted into something new. Through the windows, fresh mats were visible on the floor, along with training equipment and mirrors. A sign over the door read, "Community Defense Center." "Almost time for the afternoon class," Ms. Lorraine reminded him. "I'll watch the grill." Isaiah handed over the spatula and made his way to the annex. Inside, seniors were already gathering, dressed in comfortable workout clothes. They chatted and stretched, their initial wariness of exercise long since replaced by determination. "All right, folks," Isaiah called out, his voice carrying that calm authority from his SEAL days. "Let's start with our breathing exercises." Ms. Lorraine appeared in the doorway, taking her usual spot by the wall. She began a steady count, her timing perfect from decades of teaching. Under her cadence, Isaiah demonstrated basic blocks and strikes, movements designed to build confidence as much as skill. "Remember," he said, walking between students to adjust stances, "this isn't about hurting anyone. It's about being ready, about standing together." Through the window, he could see Nia entering with a bright blue ribbon. She'd been collecting them, one for each milestone in the community's recovery. The wall beside the door displayed dozens already, each marking a victory. The day the indictments came down, when CPS reformed their policies, the first successful class graduation. Nia waited patiently until the lesson finished, then approached the wall with ceremony. This ribbon commemorated Judge Halbrook's resignation and the subsequent federal investigation into the court's handling of removal orders. She tied it carefully next to others, stepping back to admire the collection. "Looking good, baby girl," Isaiah said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We're going to need a bigger wall soon," she replied with a grin. Outside, the block party was in full swing. Theo had set up a projector screen showing highlights from his coverage. The live stream that helped bring down the trafficking ring had earned him a regional journalism award. But more importantly, it had shown the neighborhood its own strength. Children played tag around the tables while parents chatted, sharing dishes and stories. The fear that had kept everyone isolated behind locked doors had been replaced by something stronger: community. Isaiah watched as Ms. Lorraine organized a line dancing lesson, her voice carrying across the green as she called out steps. Detective Ortiz joined them, opening the box she'd brought. Inside were official certificates for the first graduating class of the Defense Center. "The department wants to partner with your program," she said. "Expand it to other neighborhoods." "As long as they understand who's in charge," Isaiah replied. "This stays community-led." "They learned that lesson the hard way," Ortiz agreed, watching Burris's former patrol car drive past, now marked with a new officer's number. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cul-de-sac. But unlike before, these shadows held no menace. Porch lights would come on soon, not in warning, but in welcome. The neighborhood had found its voice, in the chatter of children, in the calls of greeting between houses, in the steady count of Ms. Lorraine's cadence as another class began. Through it all, music played and grills smoked, the simple sounds of life returning. Isaiah watched Nia rejoin her friends, her laughter carrying across the green. The quiet that had once meant fear had been replaced by purpose, by the steady rhythm of a community that had learned to stand together. The cul-de-sac hummed with activity, each voice adding to the chorus of renewal. Where silence had once ruled through intimidation, now the air was filled with the sounds of life reclaimed. Conversations, music, laughter, the persistent cadence of Ms. Lorraine's counting, and the determined voices of neighbors who had found their strength in unity. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.